Is this you? Okay, don't cry. Look, you're the main character. You're going through it. This makes you more relatable. Everything is chill. Everything's fine. I'm the main character. Things can't go bad. Everything's fine. How about this? If this was a movie, I'd clearly be the main character while everyone around me would be the NPCs in the background. Oh gosh, that was really bitter. Oh, anyway, time to channel cool girl at the party vibes. Like, look, ooh, I'm so mysterious. I'm so cool. Ooh, look at me. But don't look at me. But look at me. But don't look at me. But look at me. But don't look at me. But look at me. Because that's me. That's literally me. That's literally me in the video. And that's also literally how I think. And from what I've observed online, so do a lot of people who happen to be from Generation Z. Hello, my name's Hanahaki, but my friends like to call me Hans, so you can call me that too. If you've been anywhere near the internet in the past, year, you've probably heard a lot of people saying things like, romanticize your life because you're the main character. Be the main character in your own life. Live your life like the main character in a coming-of-age film. And most of these are used to motivate people to take more ownership of their life, prioritize themselves, and live to enjoy it. And while that's really great, I was just thinking, where does that come from? And why is the whole manifest being the main character in my own life such a common phrase of guidance for Generation Z? And I think maybe it's because I'm a Gen Zer myself, so a lot of times when I'm thinking about these things and the way me and my friends motivate each other, or we'll even hype each other up, we'll be like, girl, you're looking like a main character, or we'll be saying stuff like, oh my god, this is just main character vibes, or oh my god, I feel like the main character right now in a coming of age film, or this is meant to build my struggles for my plot in the movie that is my life, or something around that. Probably way less cringy. And from my interactions with other people who happen to be Gen Zers, a lot of times I just can't help but think, why do we all think like this? And why does this form of motivation work so well with my generation? To the point where it was a huge trend last year. There are 8 billion people on this planet. Surely not all of them can be main characters. We can't have 8 billion main characters, right? Don't we supposedly live in a simulation? What simulation could handle 8 billion people? Probably one that we live in. Also, maybe millennials do this, maybe other generations do this, but because of the prevalence of this existing for Gen Zers, I'm mostly talking about Gen Zers. Also, I am a Gen Zer, so it makes more sense for me to talk about the things I know and my own experiences. And most of this motivation and the whole main character energy trend has kind of existed on TikTok. And I think it's also gone onto Twitter, but it's mostly on TikTok. And since TikTok is an app mostly used by Generation Z, I'll also be talking about it from the perspective of Generation Z for that very reason. Okay, great. Now that that's out of the way, where did main character energy or main character syndrome first start happening? Okay, so now my whole description in the beginning of this video about how you have to manifest main character energy, try to be the main character in your own life and stuff, all of that is kind of called main character energy, or I saw some people online calling it main character syndrome. It's not a real syndrome, it is not a real psychological thing, but basically it's this terminology used to describe the way people are trying to live more like the protagonist of TV shows and novels and books. That is, they're trying to prioritize themselves more, live life to the fullest so that it's more exciting, and if you were to watch a movie, you'd be like, wow, that life is almost as rich as mine is. So that's basically what main character syndrome is. Now, to be frank, not Hanahaki. Alright, that was a pretty lame joke. Okay, to be completely clear, the whole main character trend started last year during, I want to say, the peak of the pandemic, but I guess I should say more during the earlier times of the pandemic, so sometime around April or May of 2020. So it's definitely a little dated in terms of YouTube topics to talk about, but I saw lots of people talking about just general trying to be the main character, how to be the main character in your life, and no one really talking about, hey, why are we thinking like this? And I've been thinking about this for, I guess, more than a year now, so I thought I'd make a YouTube video about it. Also, I noticed that even though it was a trend last year, a lot of people still use it as a form to motivate each other, or when they're describing their own life, or when we're trying to hype each other up. That's time we still do use it, or even for Instagram captions. So I definitely do think it is still relevant to talk about. Okay, now I'm going to stop trying to justify why I decided to make a YouTube video. According to an article I read that will be linked down in the description, so check it out if you're interested in the sources of this video. The main character energy trend or meme mostly started on TikTok. It has migrated from the platform since. Its origination in its full form can be accredited to Ramsey, aka user LexaProLesbian, who posted in May 2020 the following TikTok where she really embodied the whole main character and that I am the main character vibes. And I think this will make more sense when you look at the TikTok that I'm going to be playing right now.
Oh, would you look at that? It's 1:15, my favorite time of day. It's that time. Oh, you don't know what that time means, do you? Well, my neighbors do. Check it. This is the time that I walk through my neighborhood to remind everyone in my neighborhood that I'm the main character in this neighborhood. Yes, the main one. Look at my shoes. Look at my socks.
Boobs.
Look at my hair. The way I walk. I touch the ground.
Woo.
I touch my toes.
Yeah.
I pick a flower and I lay in the road. Look at me. No, look away. No, please look at me. Look away. Yes, no, ah. Give me attention, maybe, or don't, or please do.
Do.
I am the queen. I reign supreme. Disgruntled lesbian stomping the streets. Feels good, feels good. Walking through my neighborhood for the attention I didn't receive in middle school.
So here we can clearly see just through her actions, her descriptions, and the way she's like singing, which by the way, what a bop. She's clearly the main character of her neighborhood. And after she posted this, a lot of people used her sound, which is something you can do in TikTok where you use a particular sound from a video on your video. So a lot of people used her sound to create their own rendition of the whole like, I'm the main character in my neighborhood song, or they also just used it to kind of manifest main character vibes or just like support the idea in general. Another user by the name of Ashla Ward created this TikTok where she talked about how it's really important that you have to romanticize your life. I'm sure if you've been on TikTok anytime like last year during the height of the pandemic, you definitely saw TikToks about this because this audio was everywhere. And in case you haven't, here it is.
You have to start romanticizing your life. You have to start thinking of yourself as the main character. Because if you don't, life will continue to pass you by. And all the little things that make it so beautiful will continue to go unnoticed. So take a second and look around and realize that it's a blessing for you to be here right now.
So here she's talking about how you need to romanticize your life, which is an idea that's very deeply connected with becoming the main character, mostly because a lot of people think the way we romanticize being a main character due to all of the richness it provides in your life and in the storytelling that it usually exists in. It's kind of like the same idea as like romanticizing your life, because when you romanticize your life, you're kind of building a plot to it or making yourself as interesting as a main character. This part will make a little more sense when I explain it in the next section of the video, so stay tuned. So if you haven't noticed, both of these TikToks were posted during the height of the pandemic. And what I think happened here is that a lot of people used the whole like main character energy thing and romanticize your life thing as like a coping mechanism for the loss of control they felt because of the pandemic, especially considering at the time we weren't sure if there were going to be any vaccines. And so we didn't really know if the pandemic would like ever get over, which we're still curious about now because what the hell is an Omicron? And then there was like a lot of mismanagement of the whole pandemic between governments. And then there was also this whole idea of, oh my God, we're losing years of our youth to this terrible global situation that's happening. And I remember a lot of people genuinely felt like the world was ending, at least from what I was seeing on TikTok. I think this was also because it was like the pandemic was happening and then right before BLM started, so people were very like unhappy about the current political conditions and the way the government and police were treating Black people. So there was a lot of like fear and agitation in the world. And I remember a lot of people genuinely thought that this was the apocalypse and the world was ending and that everything's over for us. We're like the last generation. It was a very stressful time to be on TikTok or just a young person in general or any person, honestly. So I do see like why people use this as a coping mechanism because this establishes more control in their life. Mostly because if we feel like we're the main characters in our own stories that existed during this period of time, then like main characters, we would survive through it because main characters always get through it. And we'd feel like we'd have more control of the narrative of our lives, which at the moment we really didn't feel like we did. And so something like a global pandemic and like all the plethora of issues it brought along with it seemed way more manageable when you felt like you were the main character, because wouldn't this just feel like a plot device meant to further your personal development? According to Alejandra Sarmiento, a transpersonal psychotherapist at the SOAK, and I'll be quoting them, living in a fantasy world where we're not only able to control the narrative but also get to be the center stage can be particularly appealing when everything around us feels so completely out of control. The original message of main character syndrome was to encourage people to feel positive about their lives no matter what the reality of their circumstances were, to focus on the beauty of the present, and to find meaning in the moment so that life wouldn't simply pass us by. I think this message resonated loud and clear with an entire generation who were unexpectedly forced to miss major milestones such as graduations and proms, and who could only connect with their friends through a screen during lockdown. Now, the question of why main character syndrome was affecting Generation Z so heavily is yes, because we did definitely feel a loss of our youth, and because a lot of us were missing pivotal moments of our adolescence or young adult lives. Lots of people weren't able to graduate college and experience their senior year. Lots of high schoolers weren't able to experience their senior year. High schoolers were not able to go to prom and different social events. Just people in general not able to do the core socializing that is necessary for their development, especially in ages like adolescence and young adult years, where socializing with other people and experiencing these major milestones of your life are really necessary to your personal development, your experience of life, and is often what you're promised as you're growing up. No one expects there to be a global pandemic, and so everyone expects to be experiencing these things, and suddenly you're the only people who are not, because all the people before you experienced them, all the people after you experienced them, and now you're the only person who can't. So everyone was feeling like massive FOMO. And to be honest, I think it's pretty fair. Like for me, I missed a huge part of my college life and experience, which I was so bummed out about because I was just getting into the flow of things, and I ended up losing so many friendships just because we couldn't hang out with each other anymore, or they had to move countries, or just because of the circumstances of the pandemic. And if that happened to me, definitely happened to a lot of other people in my generation. So it's definitely a sad thing. Also, I know this sounds super privileged, and this is definitely like not to discount like the experiences of people who actually got COVID, and all the pain that people went through, people who died and lost their lives, and all the incredible efforts that were made to preserve human life. Like that's way more important than what I'm talking about. I'm just trying to talk about like why Generation Z in specific felt this way in a more like psychological sense. Also, everything I'm talking about is definitely from a more Western perspective, because my perspective of the pandemic was from a Western perspective and in a Western country, and also because I don't know if main character energy, main character syndrome is so much of a thing on TikTok in other countries as much as it was here in the West. If it was, definitely correct me, because I don't want to assume anything. And so all of this is why just having main character energy definitely would help establish some control in the lives of people who felt lost, who felt that they lost their youth. It's almost promising you that, hey, this youth you lost, you can regain it back, and you will regain it back because you're the main character. Something greater is in store for you. But why main character energy specifically? Why are we using this as a coping mechanism relative to all the other coping mechanisms that exist out there? While I believe this trend is definitely like influenced by like fanfic culture, specifically things like self-inserts, where people would write themselves into their favorite books and media and TV shows and interact with like the main characters that they love in those shows, or just like the characters in general that they love in those shows. It's also affected by like your name writing, so that's like the Y/N thing, where basically people would write these like descriptions, usually romantic, about an interaction that you, the reader, is having with a certain character. And what they do to make it really seem like you're in the book is that they put your name, the Y/N, as a placeholder for the name in general of like the person receiving the affections, and on the other hand of the interaction between the character and the other person. That way it's like you actually got to like imagine yourself talking to your favorite character, falling in love with your favorite character, flirting with your favorite character, all these incredibly fun things. Just in general, the rise of fanfic might have contributed to this, mostly because of like how it made you actually feel like you're a character in the books. I think this was like a low influence, but definitely like part of the atmosphere of things influencing the development of main character syndrome. I think a lot of memes also led to the development of main character syndrome, especially memes where they take like situations that happen in books, movies, or TV shows and compare them with how that would actually play out in your life, like in real time. And like they mostly seem to be asking, would this really happen if you were the main character, or if this was about your life? So I think that way fanfic and like meme culture in general made people kind of feel like they're the main characters. Also maybe going along the vein of like memes, if we talk about things like your FBI agent spying on you and memes of that nature, it almost made you seem like you're important enough to personally surveillanced by an agent of the FBI. And so it almost makes you feel like you're the main character somehow. I don't know if the last bit it's kind of a stretch, but it is part of the larger atmosphere of things that might have affected the development of main character syndrome. And mostly I feel this way because what the main character energy or syndrome, what it took out of the entire thing was you, or like not you specifically, but you know, the viewer of the meme or the fanfic or the piece of work. Now, this part might also sound ridiculous. These theories might be a little ridiculous, but I'm just trying to like analyze from terms of pop culture and like TV and media, like how exactly this developed. A lot of people, even in their depiction of TikToks to do with main character energy or main character syndrome, or the tweets to do with it, a lot of them seem to be referring to like things that happen in movies, or the feeling that you get when you watch like a coming of age film and certain things happen, or parts of your life that make you go, oh my god, this felt like a movie. And since the trend refers to so many things like that, I think it is possible to pull out from influences or like why did those circumstances lead to its development. So that's why some of these theories might sound far-fetched, but I promise they have like some substance to it, at least according to me. I don't know, tell me your thoughts in the comments. I really like hearing what people have to say about these things. Maybe you have a better take than I do. But anyway, the next part is also going to sound equally as ridiculous as the previous part did, but I think since most Gen Zers in the West grew up watching Disney Channel, which featured like TV shows and like movies and stuff where they stressed on like the importance of everybody, or for the first time people actually got to see characters who they kind of related with on screen, maybe through like their personality, their struggles, their interactions with other characters. It kind of made them feel like even they can be the main character. I think it is also because of the idea that Disney tries to drive in so hard with a lot of their movies, is that you're special, and where their like protagonists will go through all these hard things but still end up being successful or like brilliant and like on top, and like the priority for people growing up and being exposed to ideas like that can make you feel that'll also happen to you. Additionally, I think with the rise of the coming of age genre, which tends to be more realistic to a degree, and also in certain films it's not that realistic, I think it can be argued that since you're able to see like your experiences being played out, maybe in the places that you go to often, like if it's a coming of age film set in like high school, you might be actually able to see the things you struggled with in high school and the characters going through it at the same time as you. Seeing that and seeing them be like the main characters might make you feel like you're of importance too, and your struggles are worth it, and that by this logic you are also the main character. And especially if you connected with a particular struggle, a particular plot point, or a particular quote. And I think this is why a lot of times in the whole like you have to romanticize your life thing and like main character energy thing, or just when people are talking about movies and films, a lot of times they do talk about specific quotes because they're just trying to show like how much they related to a piece of dialogue and how much it made them feel like the main character. And perhaps maybe instead of saying main character, made them feel like a priority in their own life, because they're like, oh, like if they went through this, I can go through this too, I'll be just fine, or I'll develop into a better person after this. So I think that's how like the advent of the way media and the film genre and Disney Channel and what we've all grown up with has definitely fostered an environment for main character energy, main character syndrome to develop. See, with the rise of literature and social media and just how incredibly prevalent they've become in our lives, I think it's a little natural for us to begin to identify with them. I didn't go too deep into social media, but I also think social media plays a role, since on social media, everyone's profile is spotlighted. Sure, there are more people who have more of a draw, and like because of their social standing, because of maybe the way they look, or because of their personality, social media kind of offers an opportunity for people to voice themselves and kind of like brand themselves and feel like a character almost in the way they present themselves. So I feel like that could have also fostered this trend. Additionally, going back to movies, every movie has a plot, every movie has main characters, and in every movie the main character is usually, not always, the center of the entire story and the way the plot happens. So maybe a lot of people, in trying to make sense of their lives, it might be easier to feel like your life is a story and that you are the main character being presented in that story. So, is main character energy the antagonist or the protagonist? I feel that was kind of lame, but I don't know. It was fun to make a lame pun. Now, the good part about main character energy or main character syndrome is that it teaches people to prioritize themselves and focus on living rich lives that they feel like are worth being stories and told to other people, like movies, literature, and TV shows are. Also, it's specifically supposed to make them feel happy and to make them feel like they live in a movie because their life is just that grand. During a time when mental health rates were like at all-time low, I think it was really positive to make people think that, hey, you're a main character and this is your life and you're living in a story, so maybe the struggles you're going through are just plot points. You'll be okay, and like try to look for different ways to romanticize your life to make you feel more like your story is worth telling. I think that makes a lot of sense, and that's very like comforting for a lot of people. It also kind of pushes you to seek out fun, safe, hopefully, but also fun experiences to enrich your life. Also, I feel like if this is indeed a coping mechanism for everything that's happening in the world, it is not the worst coping mechanism out there, especially since we live in a time when we're being constantly bombarded with negative news that like the human brain is not evolved to cope with. Like the amount of terrible, horrible things that we learn about in a day is way more than our ancestors ever had to deal with like in a week, even in a month sometimes. The way we think and our cognition and stuff isn't equipped to deal with so much negativity and so much suffering, and the knowledge that we can't can't do anything about it. Just thinking of yourself as a main character really helps you cope with that, because it's like, yeah, the negative thing is happening, but I do have control over my life. Maybe not that side of the world and that side of the plot, but maybe that's just like the background to my story. But maybe the things I can control are kind of more like plot points or the background to my story, rather than things I need to focus on right now when I don't have any control over them. Where this trend does fail is that it may enable narcissistic behavior or some like problematic behavior. While I do think this applies for like a minority of people, because I genuinely do believe most people are empathetic and like good people, I can see this enabling some people to act kind of self-centered, to center themselves in every problem, to be like, I'm the main character, so I'm at the forefront of what's happening right now, so I should not really consider what other people are feeling or going through, and it kind of promotes a very like individualistic way of thinking. If main character syndrome or energy is taken too far, it could make people prioritize their wants over everyone else's basic needs. Now, I don't really want to start something, but perhaps, and only perhaps, the negative side of the whole main character energy part is kind of the way like anti-maskers think, because you're like, oh no, my inconvenience is way more important than the health and safety of multiple people. But then again, like there's like the science side of it, and this is a way more complex issue than I'm brushing over. I think that way of like thinking very individualistically about your wants and your comfort rather than like the safety of the general populace around you, that could definitely be enabled by just considering yourself as a main character at all times. Also, what I think is interesting is like back when the Truman Show came out, that was what, like the 90s or the 80s, the possibility of a regular person being the main character was not portrayed very well, and it can be argued because of the nature of how that was happening. That's why it wasn't enjoyed very much. It did seem terrifying. And for some background, the Truman Show, it's basically about this guy called Truman Burbank who lives his entire life being as a main character in a TV show that's being broadcasted to people all around the world. He doesn't know that this is happening. He hasn't consented to this, and they started the day from when he was born. I think when he gets older, like in his 30s, that's when he starts to realize what's happening, and it is a very like daunting thing that happens. He realizes that everything around him is fake. It's kind of like a simulation. Everything in his life, his struggles, his experiences have all been made for like the entertainment of other people he doesn't even know. So it's interesting to see how like back then there was like this terror around the idea of it, but now it's like, oh yeah, I'm the main character. I mean, then again, I don't think people are really thinking of themselves like in that scenario, but it's interesting to see how like two related topics have such different perspectives around them. And maybe this has something to do with how desensitized we're getting to the idea that we live in like a simulation that's been pushed out a bit, like about like how reality isn't real. We're all just like in a simulation. We're all just like Sims in some alien sim game or some like entities Sims. But I don't think that part's like directly related to like the negative points I was talking about. Just an interesting thing. Since our culture does not exist in a vacuum, it is affected by everything that happens in it, like any introduction of a new concept or a new discovery or even theories or just literature, art in general. I think it would be interesting to see if the whole simulation theory might have, in maybe minor ways, affected the way we think and could have contributed to this whole main character thing. Maybe not, maybe it did, but I do definitely think it is fascinating to think about how like the advent of the way we look at stories now and the way we tell stories now might have caused for us to talk about main characters and place ourselves in the roles of main characters. Because I don't think anyone in the time of Gilgamesh or Achilles or any of the other like major epics that we have throughout history ever pictured themselves as characters in them, at least not to my knowledge, or ever like related to them in that way. So it's interesting to see why we as a society, we as a generation at this point of time have decided to like think of ourselves in that way. Maybe it has to do with the way we consume media now, and there's the diversity in like the kinds of movies and TV shows that you get, which just makes so many more of people's experiences more relatable to like the characters that they see in media. Perhaps that's it. I'm not really sure, but it's definitely like food for thought, you know? Characters for thought. Nobody's eating characters. Also, before we get to the final part of this video, I think it is very, very important to mention two creators who I think are responsible for how longitudinal the main character energy, main character syndrome is. I think for them, you can also say that they might have contributed to the development of the idea for sure on TikTok through their TikToks. And the two creators are Yasmin Saeed, and she goes by the username at Lady Yasmina1, and Daisy Gorgeous. I wasn't able to find Daisy Gorgeous's name, but both of them make these really funny TikToks that I will be inserting after I do a quick explanation, where they basically play the roles of like characters in movies and talk about the tropes by playing those roles. They do it in like a funny way, so you want to like actually follow along with it, but they definitely do portray the main character bit quite a lot, or at least they did like last year. And here are the TikToks.
I'm aboard the lightning, the thunder, kind of girl who's gonna make you wonder who you are and who you've been, and who I've been is with you on these beaches. Your Venice bitch, your dial, your weakness. Maybe I could save you from your sins. So kiss the sky and whisper to Jesus. My. I'm aboard the lightning, the thunder, kind of girl who's gonna make you wonder who you are and who you've been, and who I've been is with you on these beaches. Your Venice bitch, your dial, your weakness. Maybe I could save you from your sins. So kiss the sky and whisper to Jesus. My. You found this, you need this.
So you see how that might have possibly contributed to the development of main character energy or main character syndrome? Now, for the very final part of this video, to be or not to be the main character. Now, taking all the information into account, I do think it is perfectly fine to think of yourself as the main character, to channel main character energy, and to manifest to be the main character and romanticize your life, as long as you do not allow that to narrow your ability to empathize with other people. After all, every main character needs other characters to progress her story, right? Is it a narcissistic take? And additionally, even video games have NPCs in the background who are vital for building the atmosphere of the stories. So even if someone is not the main character, their existence and their needs and wants are important to your story too. So it's good to keep everyone in mind. Like, let's be nice people. And see, I've seen some people use main character energy, main character syndrome in fantastic ways as like coping mechanisms, but also as like forms of escapism. Like I've seen some people being like, oh, like what I'd wear if I was the main character in my favorite fantasy novel, or what I would look like at the beginning of my favorite show, what I'd look like at the end of my favorite show as a character. And it's lovely to see that, and like people imagining themselves in their favorite stories and being able to like gain confidence from that. I know a lot of people, when they do this, they're also able to build communities when they post these on TikTok and connect with like-minded people, which could help them romanticize their life a little more, since they're able to like grow on their interests and the things that make their life rich according to them. Like I've seen some people enact those One Direction fanfics where your parents sell you to One Direction. Why would a super famous boy band need to buy little underage girls? Who knows? I'm not the writer of those stories, but it was always funny to see people like enact those as like characters there and make it like funny. And sure, escapism in incredibly high degrees is bad, but a little bit is that too bad? I don't think so. You know, being young now isn't easy. It's painful, it's uncertain, and it's full of times where you can feel like you know nothing and everything all at once, and that the pressure of the entire world is on your shoulders. If thinking that you're the main character or planning to be the main character in your life and romanticizing your life helps you manage that, then sure, go ahead, do it. I truly don't see anything wrong with it. Also, sure, we may not be the center of the universe or the story that's going on, but you are the center of the universe that you exist in, or the story that your life, if we're thinking of it as a metaphor, is being told as. And therefore, I think it's totally fine to prioritize yourself as the main character and think of yourself as like the center of the universe, especially when you have to live through that entire universe and the experiences and the traumas of that universe. Also, in a world that is going through so much every day, where there's so many people, is it so wrong to think you're the center of the universe, especially when you have to experience yourself at all times? I don't think there's anything wrong with thinking you're the main character in a world full of possibly 8 billion characters. What's so wrong with thinking that you're the protagonist of the world? Like, what's so wrong? As long as you're doing it in a healthy way, which doesn't hurt anyone, I don't see anything wrong with that. Also, Generation Z is definitely going through a mass sense of loss of their youth, experiences, and major milestones that most generations already went through. There's loss of socialization due to how little people were able to meet each other, and just a general loss in terms of the quality of life that we're experiencing now, at least for like adolescents and young adults. And though main character energy and main character syndrome might be a coping mechanism for it, it's definitely a tamer and more positive one. Conclusion is main character energy or syndrome bad? The answer is no, it's not. And you go ahead and keep channeling that and romanticizing your life, because it is helping all of us get through the absolute confusion that the past 2 years have been. Oh my god, it's about to be 2 years. Anyway, thank you so much for watching this video. I don't know if it actually made sense. I feel like it was kind of all over the place. A lot of it was just like me thinking like simulation, main characters might not have connected. Let me know what you think, if you have any thoughts about it, or if you think there's something I should have elaborated on, or thought of mine that deserves more fine tuning. It would be great to hear that. Thank you so much for watching. Again, all my sources are linked down in the bio below, so go check them out if you're interested. And again, a like and a subscribe and a comment are always super encouraging, especially for like a tiny ass channel that I exist as. Anyway, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next week. Bye! Also, I don't know, I feel like my eyes don't look completely equal. This is the sad truth of living with eyelids that decide to be different people every day. People